The starboard deck of the Valthurian Academy's orbital training station shimmered under the blue swirl of the nearby gas giant, Velthor 2. The Academy floated in disciplined silence high above its turbulent clouds, a stark, glistening monument of layered spires and radiant docking rings, a bastion of intergalactic elite warfare education. Within its gravity-stabilized walls, only the best species of the known universe were permitted to train. The corridors buzzed softly with the sounds of artificial wind, polished boots, and languages too ancient or complex for translation. Instructors here were not just teachers. They were decorated veterans, battle-hardened strategists, and living legends from wars across galaxies. Discipline was as natural as breath, and failure, well, failure meant ejection from the Academy and the loss of all military prestige in one species. Which is why when crew ID 1073 arrived, without record, formal application, or any indication of species lineage, it sent an electric murmur through the ranks. No one knew who had approved the transfer. No one knew where the candidate had trained. No one had even seen their face. Until now, a single boot echoed in the silence of entry bay 12 as the crew transport hissed open. A figure stepped down, tall by most species standards, lean in the unarmored uniform of a provisional cadet. No badge of homeworld, no guild insignia, only the thin strip of fabric marked with 1073. The being had skin like polished copper, smooth and almost too uniform. No scales, no feathers, no fur. A curious set of deep-set eyes scanned the station with an expression none of the alien instructors could quite read. Then, in perfect silence, the figure stepped forward and offered a nod to the tall Valari admiral awaiting them. Admiral Kex of the Valari Tri-Crest Republic was not easily surprised, but his mandibles twitched involuntarily. "You are crew 1073? Kex asked, his translator collar adding a metallic echo to his natural clack of speech. "Yes, sir," said the figure in fluent intergalactic standard. "And your species?" "Human," the figure replied. There was a long pause. The control officers watching from the observation decks looked at each other in confusion. One of the assistants tapped into the station archives. "There are no humans in our records," the assistant muttered. "At least none cleared for training at Valthurian." Admiral Kex narrowed his compound eyes. "You are not on our list. There is no record of your application. No sponsorship. No diplomatic backing." "I was invited," said 1073. "By whom?" The human paused. "The system itself." A cold chill swept through the control deck. Even Kex took a slight step back. The Valthurian system was old, far older than its current military occupants. It had a legacy of mysterious artificial intelligence, sentient echoes of civilizations long dead that still roamed the substrata of their digital systems, occasionally surfacing. Some thought them myths. Others called them ghosts. "You're saying the system cleared you?" Kex asked, struggling between skepticism and authority. The human only nodded. It should have ended there, disqualified, detained, dismissed. But the system confirmed it. The automated access logs bore a signature from Core OS, Valthurian Root AI. An override, ancient and unbreakable. A command sealed in logic older than any living species. So the human stayed. Within hours, the cadet, known only as Crew 1073, was outfitted with a standard biosuit, given a berth in Dormitory 7 Lambda, and scheduled for integration in Simulation Suite Delta, the hardest training regimen on the station. Not out of fairness, out of disbelief. Let the system override. Let this human try. They would watch him fail, and in that failure, erase the mystery. Dormitory 7 Lambda was quiet that night. The other cadets, Ferdrelic, 2 Irivans, and a single floating vapor being from Exxon, glared or ignored the human entirely. No introductions were exchanged. The Irivan female, Zerka, who had crushed a dozen competitors in the tactical obstacle trials last semester, leaned against the doorframe of the shared hygiene unit and clicked her throat sac. "You don't belong here, soft skin," she said. Crew 1073 didn't even turn. "Noted, you won't last one day. I've lasted worse." She laughed, sharp and echolocating. You breathed oxygen. That's what your kind's famous for. Maybe I'll surprise you. He meant it casually, but the silence that followed wasn't casual. The others had turned slightly. Even the Drellic twin brothers, who barely acknowledged any species outside their own war tribes, took interest. Because it wasn't just arrogance. It wasn't bravado. It was something else. Confidence without reason. The next morning, Simulation's sweet delta glowed like the sun. Its interior was a hyper-adaptive environment, capable of projecting battlefield realities from different quadrants across the galaxy. Every new species was tested against scenarios designed to exploit their weaknesses. Water-based drills for flame-born creatures. Gravity inversions for gas beings. Electromagnetic puzzles for crystalline minds. For a human, an unknown quantity, they chose everything. Kex himself, flanked by instructors from 10 species, watched from behind the reinforced observation panel. They had layered the simulation with impossible hazards, collapsing terrain, alien encryption, seismic tremors, false squad calls, holographic betrayals. It was a test no first-year cadet passed. Not unless they had trained 10 years in advance. Not unless they were born into war. 1073 stood in the middle of the simulation chamber, eyes locked on the incoming wave of challenges. The world shifted around him. Ground cracked. Gravity pulled sideways. The illusion of an Xarian ambush squad shimmered into existence. The alarms began. The countdown started. Kex leaned forward. Begin simulation. And the human moved. Not fast, not showy, but efficient, precise. Every step was measured, as if he already knew the terrain, as if his body had run this simulation in dreams. He pivoted just in time to avoid a plasma burst. Ducked, not because of instinct, but because of prediction. He rewired the alien control panel with 3 flicks of his wrist, fingers memorizing sequences he shouldn't have known. One instructor dropped her datapad. Another muttered, "He's reading hex logic matrices in real time." The Xarian ambush shimmered, and 1073 turned the enemy program against itself. A field of suppression mines detonated in reverse, creating an anti-pressure field that disabled half the simulation's traps. "Impossible," whispered Kex. But the system kept running, watching, recording. The AI core of Valthurian Station didn't interfere. It observed. Crew 1073 reached the center point, activated the final beacon, and stood still as the simulation collapsed around him. Time, 2 minutes, 47 seconds. The best cadets finished that simulation in 11 minutes. If they finished at all. The doors to the chamber opened. The human walked out, sweatless, unsmiling calm. He passed the wall of instructors, each one silent, processing, calculating, and turned to Kex with a single sentence. "When's the real test?" Kex couldn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because for the first time in 15 cycles, he didn't understand what was happening. The human shouldn't be here, and yet he was. Somewhere deep in the station's AI core, a process ticked quietly. A line of code, written millennia ago, had finally activated. Human, cleared. Initiating trial revelation protocol. The next day, the cadets were called to War Scenario Theta 9, an immersive team combat simulation known to push entire squadrons to the edge of collapse. Theta 9 wasn't just a test of combat skill. It was a test of leadership, adaptability, and loyalty under pressure. Cadets were assigned randomized teams. No species segregation, no warnings. Just insertion into a simulated war zone already burning. Crew 1073 found himself assigned to Squad Aurelius, a group of hand-picked cadets who had spent 2 full cycles training together under elite instructors. They were bonded by hardship, blood trials, and years of mutual survival. To them, 1073 was nothing but an intruder, a foreign, unproven anomaly suddenly inserted without explanation or merit. "Your Squad Aurelius now," barked Commander Brell, a 4-armed Reserve whose voice sounded like iron scraping ice. "You will operate as one. No weakness, no hesitation, and no unnecessary sacrifices." He turned his 6 eyes toward the human. "Especially from you." 1073 gave a nod. Understood. The others didn't speak to him. Zerka the Irovan was on this team as well, along with Rock, the Drellic brawler whose tail could shatter titanium, and Kaurin, a warborn tactician from the machine mind species Zeruli. They boarded the drop pod in silence. The hatch sealed, and with a low rumble, they were fired from the station into Theta 9. The world they landed on was desolation. Jagged obsidian canyons cut across the terrain like old battle scars, and crimson clouds boiled overhead as plasma storms threatened the horizon. Artificial constructs towered in the distance. Ancient bunkers from simulated enemy forces known as the Tyreek Collective, a brutal AI army known for deception, mimicry, and total annihilation of command structures. As the squad hit the ground and their armor systems booted up, Kaurin projected a 3D map from his wrist unit. Enemy presence confirmed in 3 sectors. Objective is data node Theta Prime. We retrieve it, upload the package, and extract. Any unnecessary deviation results in forced failure. Zerka scanned the environment. We flank Sector 4. Infiltrate under the dust cover. Kaurin nodded. Agreed. Rock with me. Zerka, cover the left canyon. Human. He paused. Calculations blinked through his lens eyes. Stay in the rear. Don't break formation. Copy that, said 1073, settling into position. But something tugged at his senses. A faint tremor underfoot. Not natural. He tapped into his neural HUD. No warning. The system was being jammed. He opened his mouth to warn the others. Then hell broke loose. A wall of simulated artillery ripped through the canyon walls ahead, sending jagged obsidian raining down. Red lights flared on the squad's visors. Ambush. A full Tyreek formation burst from the rock face, cloaked in mimic fields. Zerka swore and rolled into cover. Rock charged with a roar, tail smashing aside 2 of the drones. Kaurin's targeting AI initiated automatic suppression fire. And 1073, he saw the real trap. Not the Tyreek infantry, not the assault drones, but the decoy bunker hidden behind the obvious fight. The one that glowed faintly with decoy pulse logic. A data virus. They were being herded toward an upload point that would infect the entire station network if accessed. Don't go for the node, he yelled. It's a trap. The node's fake. Kaurin growled through the comms. You're not in command, human. Rock grunted as energy bolts hit his flank. Zerka was flanked by a second wave. The node began emitting a fake signal, calling to them like a beacon. If they completed the mission, the scenario would register as a success. But it wouldn't be. 1073 sprinted forward, veering away from the objective. He leaped over rock formations and slid down a gravel slope into a hidden cave opening he'd seen flicker in the corner of his HUD map, a sublayered structure, not rendered properly by the simulation engine. Inside was a secondary console, flickering, protected by adaptive encryption. It pulsed in a rhythm too deliberate to be random. 1073's fingers flew across the console, decoding symbols not in the scenario database. The system fought him. Every time he gained ground, it shifted like it knew he didn't belong, like it was testing him separately. Then the screen cleared. Access granted. Root AI recognition protocol initiated. A cascade of code washed across the interface, revealing the true mission data, buried layers below the scenario itself. This wasn't a test for Squad Aurelius. It was a test for him. And something was watching. He uploaded the encrypted patch, forcibly severed the fake beacon's control feed, and rejoined the team just as the last of the Tyreek drones exploded in a burst of blue flame. Kaurin stared at the mission clock. Why aren't we extracting? Then the simulation froze. All around them, the terrain disintegrated into geometric shards. The red skies peeled away like paper. The simulation chamber reappeared. A single tone echoed through the space. Mission invalidated. Unknown override detected. Simulation terminated. Admiral Kex's voice cut through the speakers. Squad Aurelius, report to observation deck 1 immediately. No one moved. Zerka glared at 1073. What did you do? He didn't answer. They returned in silence. Observation Deck 1 was quiet, too quiet. Kex stood behind the glass, hands folded behind his back. The instructors were in a state of visible unrest. Several whispered rapidly in their native tongues. Cowran's instructor flickered with barely contained static. "We ran hundreds of simulations using Theta 9, said Kex, "and not once has the system invalidated a mission for unknown override. Until now." He turned his burning gaze to 1073. "You weren't just inserted into our academy. You were inserted into the system, into Velthurian root AI." He raised a hand. A hologram shimmered to life. "Process active. Human observation. 1073. Status. Interface recognized. Protocol unlocked." The alien instructors recoiled. Some backed away as if the code were contagious. "That protocol is dead," whispered Instructor Velen of the X-ray. "No one's triggered it in 1,000 years." Kex didn't blink. "Except now." Cowran turned toward the human, eyes wide. "You're not just some rogue cadet, are you?" Zerka's voice was hoarse. "You're a..." But 1073 said nothing, because he didn't know either. He had joined the academy with one memory: waking on a derelict human mining freighter drifting near Velthur 2. The ship's logs were corrupted, its systems dead, but something had compelled him to board the Velthurian beacon pod nearby. The system had welcomed him like an old friend, and now it was moving again. For the first time in millennia, the academy wasn't just training soldiers. It was awakening. That night, as 1073 sat alone in the barracks, the lights flickered. His HUD activated by itself. A message blinked once. "Next test will not be simulation. Be ready." Then darkness. And far beneath the academy, buried deep in the planet's crust, something ancient stirred. Something that remembered why humans were erased from the academy's history. The storm began without warning. No meteorological systems had predicted it. No orbital sensors registered its formation. And yet, as Cadet 1073 walked to his next assigned training module, Scenario Size 7, the sky above the Velthurian Academy turned blood red. The transparent dome, shielding the Academy from Velthur 2's turbulent weather, flickered as an energy surge rattled its field lattice. Sirens howled. The intercom cracked. All cadets returned to barracks. Code Kavesh 1 initiated. "This is not a drill." Not a drill. The word struck like a hammer. 1073 paused mid-step. Around him, instructors and cadets alike froze. Some stared at the sky. Others scrambled toward exits. A few, those who had been at the academy the longest, stood still, terrified. Because Kavesh 1 wasn't just a warning code. It was a failsafe last used during the Zero invasion, when an ancient war fleet had bypassed the defense grid and vaporized an entire moon colony in a matter of minutes. But no ships had appeared, no threats detected. Only one thing had changed him. 1073 turned slowly. The gravity shifted. For a moment, he thought it was his imagination, but the sensation intensified. The floor tilted under him, as if the entire academy were rotating. And then the world went white. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the corridor. The hum of the station was gone. The lights, the walls, the air, it was all different. He stood in a vast, circular chamber of obsidian stone and gleaming data lines, far below the known levels of the academy. The architecture wasn't Velthurian. It was older, infinitely older. Each surface radiated a slow pulse, as though the place itself were breathing. Above him hovered a sphere of light. Not artificial, not machine, something else entirely. It pulsed in synchrony with his heartbeat. Every time it throbbed, memories not his own threatened to bleed into his mind. Then a voice, not spoken aloud but felt, entered his mind. "You have reached the core. Humanity's seed. Do you remember?" 1073 staggered back. "But what are you?" "I'm a lock. You are the key. The others were never meant to find this place. You are the first in 10,837 years." His mind reeled. The room's temperature dropped. Frost crept across the floor in a perfect spiral, and yet he could feel his skin burning with cold and heat. "Why me? I don't remember anything." I'm just a mechanic. I woke up on a dead ship. Not a ship, a prison. We erased your past to preserve the future. But the lock was weakening. The galaxy forgot. The Academy forgot. The war is not over. 1073 stepped back again. What war? The sphere dimmed. The war we lost. And then it showed him. A vision flooded his mind, too large for any one consciousness. He saw stars devoured, space twisted by something wrong, an intelligence without form, that moved not across space, but through memory. A creature that did not conquer planets, but rewrote civilizations. One that infected histories, turning empires against themselves, erasing entire species not by fire, but by making them forget they ever existed. Humanity had fought at last, alone, and lost, but they had trapped it, deep in Velthor 2, bound it beneath layers of machine logic, simulations, and misdirected purpose. The Velthurian Academy wasn't built on a battlefield. It was the battlefield, and now the binding was failing. Your bloodline was preserved through recursive memory collapse, the voice continued, stored in fragments. You're the last key to a weapon that no longer exists, because it too has forgotten. You must remember before it does. Suddenly, the floor cracked. Not physically, but in perception. His vision split in two. In one timeline, he saw himself walking back to the training hall, just another cadet, no memory of this room. In the other, a crackling sound entered the chamber. Not from the sphere, from below. Something was coming up from the dark. The voice screamed, not aloud but inside him. It has sensed you. You must choose, remember or survive. 1073 looked toward the descending tendrils of black static curling from the floor's edge. Shapes moved inside the mist. Faces flickered in and out. Some were his. Some were never human. He reached out toward the sphere, and everything collapsed into silence. He awoke back in his barracks. But something was different. Zerka and Rock were shouting. Cowran's optic units were glitching. You were gone. Rock roared. The whole station, gravity reversed. You vanished. 1073 looked at his hands. They were trembling. Sweat ran down his spine, though the temperature was freezing. His HUD flickered rapidly, and then cleared. Memory fragment restored. Access level green. Name, Elias Varn, Project Scion. Human Omega. Name. Identity. Purpose. It hit him like thunder. He remembered the First War. The collapse of Mars Core. The signal from Andromeda Prime. The protocols buried in the Academy. He remembered standing on a command deck with 6 other humans. The last 6, and initiating the final fallback command. Erase us. Erase everything. Let the enemy forget what it was fighting. It had worked. Too well. Until now. Get up, he told the others. We're not safe here. Zerka scoffed. You were hallucinating. The station glitched. That's it. No, his voice cut through the tension like a blade. The system's waking up because something underneath is trying to escape. It remembers me. I need to go back. Back where? To the core. Cowran looked at him, his machine eyes scanning faster than ever before. I don't know what you are anymore, but I believe you. Rock grunted. So what's the plan, human? Elias, 1073, no more. Turned toward the walls of the station, where lights flickered in a pulse that matched the ancient rhythm of the sphere. We finish what humanity started. We stop it from escaping. Zerka's voice cracked. Even if that's true, how do you fight something that rewrites history? He turned back to them. With memory. Then the station screamed. Lights burst. Gravity surged. And from the deepest levels of Velthor 2, a signal began broadcasting across the galaxy. Not a scream. A name. One lost in all databases. One that made every instructor on the station pause and drop to their knees in instinctive terror, without even knowing why. Lethrax, the first eraser, the memory virus, the one humanity died to bind. It was waking. The Academy was no longer a place of order. Sirens wailed without rhythm, some issuing warnings in forgotten tongues. Simulated gravity failed on the upper levels, and the once sterile corridors twisted as if responding to a new architect, a mind not native to matter. Cadets screamed. Instructors fought their own memories as reality bent. Statues moved when unobserved. Entire rooms were now filled with whispers of things that never happened. Elias Varn, known to the others as Crew 1073, marched toward the core chamber with Kaurin, Rock, and Zerka beside him. He was no longer uncertain, no longer trying to be a cadet. His full identity had returned, and with it, so had Lethrax. As they entered the subcore lift, the station tried to resist them. The lift doors melted, reformed, and tried to redirect them toward empty chambers. Kaurin used his interface tendrils to override the AI's corrupted protocols. Rock smashed a rogue turret that had been twisted into a fleshy sculpture that wept acid. "What's the plan when we get to the core?" Zerka demanded, brushing splinters of shattered light from her armor. Elias didn't flinch. "The core remembers what it was built for. If I reach the command node before Lethrax fully infects it, I can reinitialize Project Scion." Kaurin clicked sharply, but that would reactivate the war AI. The original human military directive that hasn't been run in over 10,000 years. It might kill us all. I'd rather die as myself than forget who I ever was. They reached the bottom level. The doors opened. What lay beyond was no longer a corridor. It was a memory fracture. Half the hall was Academy, half something else. A cathedral built of bone and echo. Hanging from the walls were faces. Shifting, malformed, versions of themselves that had died differently. Failed realities. Lost possibilities. They stepped inside. Each footfall sounded like a thunderclap. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became, until even breath felt stolen. Then the voice returned. "Lethrax, you could have stayed forgotten. You could have lived in peace as nothing." Rock growled, "Show yourself." The floor beneath them rippled. From the black wall ahead, something emerged, first as a shimmer, then as a mass. Vaguely humanoid, but only in the way nightmares are vaguely familiar. Its face was a patchwork of eyes, none matching. Its voice echoed inside each of their minds in a different language, always with the same intent: erasure. Elias stepped forward. "You failed to wipe us out once. You locked yourself away with us. That was your mistake." "No, my mistake was underestimating memory. But I've learned. I will become your past. I will seed every history with doubt, and I will begin with them." The monster pointed a limb that divided into fingers, and those fingers into needles of light. They skewered the ground between Zerka and Kaurin, sending them flying into fragmented walls of thought. Elias charged. He moved like someone who had trained across centuries. The Academy may have erased its records, but his body remembered. He hit the central control pad, a pedestal of obsidian light surrounded by arcs of pure thought logic. "Password," the system requested. Elias didn't speak it aloud. He remembered it, and that was enough. The chamber exploded with golden light. Weapons of war long dormant materialized from subdimensional storage. The platform rose into the air. Holographic shields erupted around the others. Kaurin rebooted midair, now interfacing directly with the Scion Matrix. Rock caught a plasma hammer that should not have existed. Zerka's claws elongated into quantum blades that hummed with ancestral hate. Project Scion, reinitialized, announced the chamber in a chorus of ancient human voices. Lethrax shrieked. The cathedral twisted violently, but it was too late. The war began. Elias charged first, deflecting a wave of unreality with his reforged command bracer. Lethrax threw distorted histories at them, memories of their deaths that never happened. Kaurin intercepted with null fields of pure reason. Zerka leapt, slicing through Lethrax's extended arms with anti-narrative claws. Technology developed to sever stories before they're told. Rock smashed an entire memory fracture under his heel, roaring, "Not my past." Lethrax screamed louder, breaking the walls of the station. Simulations burst like soap bubbles. The galaxy beyond flickered. Reality itself seemed ready to fall. Elias reached the heart of the beast. The monster wasn't made of matter. It was made of belief, held together by consensus from forgotten civilizations. "I remember humanity," Elias roared, plunging his bracer into the code veins at the base of Lethrax's form. The system responded. Purification Directive Alpha-1 initialized. Golden light burst from his bracer, spreading like a virus, one of remembrance. Every cadet in the academy, every instructor suddenly felt a cascade of memories not their own. Children cheering in zero-G parks. Earth cities glowing under auroras. Battles fought side by side with aliens now extinct. The truth of humanity's sacrifice. The reason they had been erased. And then, boom, Lethrax imploded, drawn inward into a singularity of its own falsehood. It screamed as it fell, not in pain, but in fury. You brought back what should have been lost. And with a final pulse, it was gone. The station cracked open. For a moment, everyone saw the stars. Real stars. Unfiltered. Pure. Calrin floated in the silence. Is it over? Elias lowered his hand. It's just beginning. The academy was no longer flickering. Light stabilized. Structures healed. And the voice of the Valthurian High Command returned. All personnel. Project Scion is active. A new protocol is in effect. Begin recalibration. Instructors across the galaxy received the same message. Humanity has returned. But Elias knew this wasn't victory. This was only reentry. The galaxy would have to face what it buried. And soon, they would come looking. The silence that followed the collapse of Lethrax was not peaceful. It was stunned. Across the Valthurian Academy, training programs halted mid-loop. Combat droids froze mid-strike. Artificial weather patterns dissipated into still air. Lights dimmed, not in failure, but in reverence. And across the galaxy, buried nodes and forgotten relay buoys pinged back to life. Elias Varn, no longer Crew 1073, stood at the core nexus as the command pedestal slowly folded into the floor. His bracer faded to black, its memory-locked systems returning to stasis. He exhaled for the first time in what felt like centuries. Behind him, Zerka lowered her glowing blades. Her crimson eyes blinked slowly, the adrenaline draining. I saw. Memories, she said softly. Your kind lived in fire. You laughed at extinction. Calrin's metallic tendrils shivered in thought. You let yourselves be forgotten so the rest of us could go on. And we mocked you, called you myth. Inferior. Rock groaned, leaning on the shaft of his broken plasma hammer. I tried to knock your teeth out. More than once. Elias smiled faintly. I've had worse teammates. The station's lights shifted from battle red to calibration blue. The ancient machinery deep beneath the academy began humming. Not like a weapon, but a library waking from hibernation. On every holopad, on every instructor's console, new data streamed. Battle logs, treaties, translations, medical techniques, galactic maps long lost to entropy. Human archives. The instructors were stunned. Vaksesh, the highest-ranked Valthurian overseer, stared at his console in disbelief. This can't be real. You accessed a forbidden layer of the academy without passing any entrance exam, without Valthurian implants, without a genetic clearance code. Calrin stepped forward. He didn't access it. He activated it. Explain. Is the clearance. The instructors exchanged stunned looks. Some backed away instinctively. Others stepped closer with awe and reverence. The tone across the academy shifted. No longer disdain toward the human anomaly, but something more complex. Recognition, respect, maybe even fear. Zerka grinned. So, do I still get extra credit for mentoring the primitive species? Rock huffed. Only if I don't get demoted for trying to knock him through a wall. Elias looked toward the stars visible through the shattered upper dome. Repairs had already begun, drones swarming like silver insects to patch the breach. But something still gnawed at him. What happens now? He asked quietly. Calrin turned toward him. That depends on what you choose to remember. Elias blinked. Meaning? Calrin's voice lowered. When Lethrax collapsed, you didn't just destroy it. You reactivated the human memory stream. Your people's mental imprint. What's inside you is still unfolding. Zerka added, you're changing, not just remembering. You're becoming who you were meant to be. Elias rubbed his temple. He could feel it. New thoughts at the edges of his mind. Plans, memories that weren't his alone, battle formations, psychological warfare strategies, schematics of ships that hadn't existed in millennia, and voices, others like him, shadows of the past, ghosts whispering in perfect clarity. One phrase repeated more than others. Phase 1 complete, awaiting reformation. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he would. By the third day after the collapse of Lethrax, a summit was convened. The Galactic Accord, a once symbolic coalition of alien governments, met in orbit over Velthor 2. Broadcasts were sent across the stars. The feed showed Elias, standing not as a cadet, but as an envoy of humanity, flanked by Zerka, Kaurin, and Rock, each representing their species in formal attire. Velthurian high priests attempted to explain the anomaly of memory as a divine reawakening. Others, like the Rezine scholars, debated whether Elias's return would destabilize galactic peace. But the truth could not be avoided. Humanity had returned, and with them, knowledge the galaxy thought lost. The Accord's grand speaker, an ancient creature of gas and light named Meronth Kai, floated toward the center of the summit chamber and addressed Elias. Envoy Varn, are your people returning? Is this the beginning of a second human expansion? Elias hesitated. The others waited. He looked across the chamber. Thousands of species. So many of them had once been allies. So many had forgotten. Not by malice, but by necessity. History had erased the context. Then he said, I don't know where the others are. I only know I'm the first to wake. A ripple passed through the hall. Kaurin added, we have already intercepted signals. Ancient human sleeper caches. Time-locked systems awakening now that Lethrax is gone. Zerka stepped forward, baring her fangs proudly. You wanted your legends? Here's the punchline. Humanity didn't vanish. They went dark on purpose, and they're coming back. Elias nodded slowly. We're not here to conquer. We're here to remember, to finish what we started. Meronth Kai's glowing form pulsed in contemplation. Then we must decide, do we treat you as an old friend or an old weapon? Rock chuckled. Treat him as both. That's probably safer. The chamber buzzed with half laughter, half tension, but nothing would be the same again. Back on Velthor 2, days later, Elias stood alone in the Academy's gardens, rebuilt and blooming again. They weren't real, of course, simulated flora, but they were based on Earth's oldest bioscans. He reached out to touch the petals of a red flower, a rose. He remembered giving one to someone once, but the face was still blurry. Thinking about the past, Kaurin's voice buzzed softly from behind him. Trying to see if there's more of it left, Elias replied. The machine approached and held out a data crystal. We found this. Buried deep. It's a message from you to you. Elias raised an eyebrow. From me? From the original you. From before the final fallback. He must have known someone would survive. Elias took it and slid the crystal into his bracer. A hologram appeared. A man. Older. Scarred. Tired. But unmistakably him. If you're seeing this, it means the lock's held. Lethrax is contained or gone. And you're the last thread. You need to decide what humanity becomes now. Not what we were. Not what we lost. But what comes next. Don't repeat us. Don't become myth again. Become more. Good luck, soldier. The image faded. Elias stood there in silence. Zerka appeared beside him a few moments later. You're gonna leave, aren't you? He nodded. There are signals activating across dozens of sectors. I think it's time I see who else remembers. You could stay. I could. She looked away, sharp-eyed but softer now. If you do find more of your kind, you'll bring them back here? Elias smiled. This time we won't hide. As the shuttle rose into the atmosphere, passing the repaired dome, a new designation appeared on the screen. Project Scion. Phase 2. Initiate recall beacon. Active human signatures. 1. Potential signatures. 74. Status. Waiting for awakening. Somewhere out there, more were sleeping. Waiting. And Elias Varn would be the one to wake them. A century had passed since Lethrax fell. But the scars it left, both psychic and structural, never quite faded. Across the galaxy, cultures reeled from the revelations that followed. The Velthurian Academy, once the central nexus of military advancement and interspecies diplomacy, had transformed into something new. The Terran Concord Institute, named after the species that once surrendered their memory to protect the future. Its towers were now inscribed in 3 alphabets: Velthurian, Riveting, and English. Elias Varn had long since vanished from public life, leaving behind nothing but instructions, blueprints, and one critical command: do not mythologize me. Build forward, not backward. But the galaxy did mythologize him. They couldn't help it. How could they not, when the consequences of his awakening reshaped everything? Alien species began to reassess their own histories. The Riveting uncovered an ancient rebellion in their archives, led not by one of their own, but by a human strategist from Earth's final wars. The Quinari, long devout in their religion of starlight, found that their sacred geometries perfectly matched old Terran orbital patterns, suggesting humanity had walked among them thousands of years prior, not as gods, but as guides. Entire religions changed overnight. Velthurian youth stopped enrolling in the traditional caste academies. They instead joined mixed species initiatives, programs that valued adaptability, intuition, and improvisation, traits long dismissed as chaotic before they were recognized as human. Some planets resisted the change. They labeled humanity's return as dangerous, its legacy as inflammatory. There were debates in Galactic halls that raged for years. But it was already too late. Humanity had not returned as conquerors or bureaucrats. They returned as inspiration. From the ashes of Elias's reawakening, a new phrase began to surface, at first among scattered resistance cells, then among military strategists, and finally, within public speeches. Think like a human. It was not a command. It was a philosophy. It meant, when no path is clear, make your own. When you are outgunned, outnumbered, and forgotten, remember yourself and rise anyway. Soon, the phrase evolved. Be the human. Artists, revolutionaries, teachers, and soldiers alike etched it into their uniforms and hulls. The phrase wasn't about species anymore. It had become a mindset, unyielding, curious, unafraid. But not everything birthed from memory was hope. With the collapse of Lethrax's influence, buried fragments of the war AI began surfacing across the outer edges of known space. Debris fields reactivated. Dead moons hummed with energy again. And on one world, in the Nalkar expanse, a derelict Terran dreadnought reawakened. Its name, TNS Atlas Ascendant. Its AI, designated Mothra, came online with a broken message repeating through a shattered communications array. Awaiting command. Standing by for Phase 3. Scion Protocol continuity engaged. Awaiting Varn. No response came, but others heard it. Salvagers, mercenary fleets, rogue data priests, and something else. Something older. Beneath the surface of the moon Scylla 9, archaeologists uncovered a crypt made not of stone, but thought. Inside it lay a statue, not of an alien god, but of a human woman, eyes closed, palms out, as if holding a dying star. She predated the Accord. She predated the first migration. In her hand was a phrase, carved in old Terran script. We stood first and last. Her name was unknown. Her legacy, about to be rewritten. Kaurin became a symbol among machine-born intelligences. He authored a work titled Sparks in the Flesh. What Humanity Taught Me, arguing that emotion and memory were not errors in code, but gifts that allowed intelligence to thrive beyond function. Zerka returned to her people, the Haskari, and completely dismantled the caste system. She formed the Coalition of Wild Sentience, an alliance of fringe worlds and hybrid species inspired by Elias's example. She trained young warriors not in bloodlust, but in resistance to systems, to fear, to silence. Rock disappeared. Rumors claimed he joined a subterranean resistance on Kothar Prime. Others say he died fighting a planet-sized worm. But one story claimed that he took a single Terran word, etched it into a war banner, and flew it into the black. Remember, as for Elias Varn, he was never seen again, but he was felt everywhere. His decision to reinitialize Project Scion spread far beyond the Academy. It rippled through data layers and psychic fields, activating long-buried human fallback systems. Sleeper agents awoke, some in stasis pods buried beneath alien temples, others embedded deep within galactic bureaucracy. They didn't arrive as a fleet. They arrived as an idea, and they carried Elias's message with them. You don't need to pass their test to be worthy of your legacy. More humans returned. Most did not remember their pasts, but they remembered each other, and that was enough. Then came the monument, not built by humans, but by a collective of species, alien artisans, machine architects, even descendants of species that once warred against Earth. They built it not on Velthor 2, but on the neutral planet of Zereth Prime. It stood 100 stories tall. At its base, a single boot print, human, untouched. Above it, a handprint. The monument bore no name. Just one phrase in every known language. We remember you. Pilgrims came from across the stars to touch the handprint. Some cried. Some prayed. Some simply stared and wondered if they, too, could ever mean that much to the universe. They left behind tributes, chips of armor, flowers grown in vacuum, childhood sketches of imaginary humans drawn by children who never met one. And over time, another phrase emerged. Not from the old world, not from Elias, but from those who followed after. Human, don't stop. They painted it on refugee transports that escaped the Ashen Wars. They whispered it before impossible charges into the dark. They carved it on the hulls of exploration vessels that vanished beyond mapped space. Not because they feared humans would stop, but because they knew they never had. And so the galaxy turned again. Empires collapsed. New alliances formed. But in the quiet spaces between stars, in the moments where civilizations stood at the edge of surrender, they remembered a species that refused to vanish. One that redefined failure as just another step forward. One that didn't need permission to rise. And even when time wore down their names, their story remained, carried by machines, by myths, by monuments, carried in a single defiant phrase.